Yeah, I'm Jenni Gunn. I'm from Perth. I just recently moved back here from having spent 7 years in Stirling at university. I work in the care sector with adults and children with learning difficulties, and I'm standing in Scottish Parliament elections this year for R.I.S E, Scotland's Left Alliance. Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the great things about the referendum was that a lot of people that just felt completely disenchanted with the political system or disengaged with like traditional ways of doing politics, so just going to the ballot box, really felt inspired to go out and do things. Like my sort of proudest moment of the referendum was getting my mum to vote yes, but not even to vote yes. She became a political activist, and this is a woman that at 53 years of age had never voted, had never actually felt the need to go out and put her mark on the ballot paper because she didn't believe in any of it. And she started off as a no voter, and we had a lot of arguments about it, and then when she looked into it, she decided she wanted to join Women for Independence, and she became an office bearer for them, and she campaigned with them. She went out and leafleted, she canvassed, and it really kind of captured her imagination in the way that no other political campaign ever had. And I think why the referendum has engaged so many people is because it wasn't just offering you a simple choice between two political parties, it was offering you a vision for a different kind of country. And there were lots of competing visions out there. Like when I campaigned alongside people in the SNP and the Greens, but the SSP and the Radical Independence campaign, of who I was members of, had a really sort of different radical left-wing vision of Scotland, and I think without our sort of input into the referendum we never would have got near 45%. I think it reached a lot of people in communities that are largely ignored by the main political parties and turn up to these communities on election day, election time, but are missing in action for the rest of the year. And I think why it's so important to be at least aware of what's going on in politics is that you might not care about politics, but politics cares about you, and people have power, and parties like the Tories and the elites that run this country, they count on people like me and you not being interested. They count on people like me and you not caring and not turning out to vote and not protesting, because that's how they get away with scandalous things that they do, by cutting benefits, by making sure that disabled people stay on lower incomes, by going to war with other countries that we have no problem with. They count on people not being interested. So I think it's so important, not only for our democracy but for our future as a country, as a people, that people stay engaged and get as involved in politics as they can. I am currently registered to vote, and I will be voting on May the 5th. Quite exciting. I never wouldn't vote. I think even if you go to spoil your ballot paper, it's important, and I think that many women before me have fought for my right to go and do that, and I think young people especially, I'm not as young now as I was, I'm 25 now, but young people's voices in politics is really important as well. And now that 16 and 17 year olds have the vote, it's really important that we encourage that demographic of people to get out and register. So 17th April is the deadline. Everyone go register. It's really, really important. Go vote. Very good. I've unfortunately I've used the NHS a lot in the past few years. I have a mental health condition, and I was treated brilliantly. I had my tonsils out last year. I was in Ninewells Hospital in Dundee, not this region, but a really good hospital. And my dad actually had a heart attack a couple of years ago. And they do an amazing job. They do an absolutely fantastic job, and I can't think of anything scarier than things like TTIP that will threaten the integrity of our public services, especially the NHS. And I think that the NHS is the single best thing that Britain has done ever. And I think it's a scandal that people like the Tories and a lot of commentators have said things like, oh, we can't afford the NHS, the way it's going, the ageing population. And like, the NHS was set up in the 1940s. We'd just come out of the worst atrocity that we'd ever experienced as a nation. The Second World War bankrupted this country. Half of England was lying in ruins. Major cities in Scotland were. And what was the first thing we decided to do? Free universal healthcare for everyone. if we can afford it in 1947, we can afford it now. We're a rich country, and the fact that people are trying to say that, you know, the NHS is a victim of its own success, it's a joke. You know, the NHS is the single most important thing I think that we should protect. Right, so to explain why to vote R.I.S E, I think you need to explain like what R.I.S E is and like what it came out of. And R.I.S E was born of the independence movement. It wouldn't exist if the independence movement hadn't existed. And it's essentially a collection of left-wing, pro-independence, pro-democracy forces in Scotland. So the main sort of big groupings in it are people who worked for the Radical Independence Campaign and members of the Scottish Socialist Party. But over that, we have people that are non-affiliated. We have trade union activists, we have community activists, we have gay rights activists. We're a really sort of broad grouping, but we collected around these 4 principles that R.I.S E stands for, which is respect, independence, socialism and environmentalism. And we believe that those 4 things are have to be at the heart of everything we do. So respect doesn't necessarily just mean respecting other people's views. It means that taking things like feminism right into the heart of our movement. It means taking things like black and ethnic minority voters and activists into the heart of our movement and everything we do. It means that we make politics accessible for people who have disabilities, especially learning disabilities. That's something that I'm obviously really passionate about because it's my day job. Independence, that's an obvious one. We believe in an independent Scotland, but we don't believe in the SNP's vision of an independent Scotland. We don't believe that we should be cutting corporation tax. We don't believe that Scotland should be a member of NATO. We think we should have a Scottish Socialist Republic. We don't think we should keep the monarchy, and we don't think we should keep the pound. And socialism goes back to a tradition that's long held in Scotland, but it's sort of been a dirty word, and we believe that socialism means that we should always put the millions before the millionaires, that we should protect our public services, that we should invest in our public services, and that we should have democratic ownership of the resources of this country. So we believe in things like nationalising the energy companies, nationalising public transport, bringing that into public ownership for for fairness, and to make sure that services are kept up to scratch. And environmentalism is another one that we really believe in, and this is how we differ slightly from the Greens. And we know that the Greens have environmentalism is at the heart of everything that they do, but for us you can't be truly environmentalist if you're not also socialist, because we believe that the only way to stop the worst excesses of climate change is to radically change the way that capitalism overproduces and how we consume. So things like the nationalisation of the energy industries, we believe, is like ultimately very, very important for making headway on that issue. So if you believe in the same things as R.I.S E does, if you believe that we should have an independent socialist Scotland, if you believe that feminism is important, that anti-racism is important, if you believe that politicians should take a worker's wage, which all R.I.S E representatives will do, if you believe that we should try and end corruption and cronyism in politics by only serving 2 terms, that's why you should vote for us. And we need strong socialist voices in Parliament fighting for that working class majority, and I think that's been missing for the past sort of 10 years in Scottish politics, and the Parliament has suffered because of that. And we can see what happens when we have socialists in Parliament. When we have socialists in Parliament, we get things done like free prescriptions, which is an SSP policy. So if you'd like to see all those things happen, if you'd like strong voices for working class people in Parliament, then you should vote R.I.S E on May the 5th. I don't think Trident is necessary to deter against our greatest threat, because I think that our greatest threat is not in terms of national security, it's in terms of things like food security, in terms of things like security of jobs, of security of standards of living. I think that the biggest threat to the ordinary people of this country right now is Tory austerity, and I don't think that Trident in any way helps us, protect us from that sort of threat. In fact, it increases the threat because it costs us billions and billions of pounds every year. It is completely and utterly obsolete as a weapon. Even the Americans have admitted that you know, they put no stock in Trident anymore. It's an affront to human decency, it's an affront to global peace. It makes us a target, it does not keep us safe. There is absolutely no reason why we have to have nuclear weapons. The vast majority of countries in the world do not have nuclear weapons. We are in the minority. It's time that we got rid of that absolute abomination. I've marched at Trident rallies, I've glued myself to barriers at Faslane. The thing is an absolute abomination, and the sooner we can get rid of it the better. And I support my comrades in the SNP for standing against Trident, but I think it's absolutely hypocrisy that they support Scotland's membership to NATO and independent Scotland, because NATO is a nuclear alliance, it's a war machine, it's undemocratic, it has served no purpose to further global peace, and R.I.S.E would unequivocally withdraw from NATO if Scotland was independent. So one of our main priorities is to have a mandate for a second referendum, because we believe that we could use this mandate for two things. We believe that the power to call a referendum should be within the Scottish Parliament. We shouldn't have to go begging to Westminster next time. And this whole malarkey about once in a generation is actually not what democracy is about. If the mandate is there and the will of the people wants it, we should have a referendum. By having a mandate for the referendum in the Scottish Parliament, what we could do is say to the Westminster government, we now have the power to call it ourselves, so you better think twice before you put in really, really unpopular policies that Scottish people do not support. Things like the bombing of Syria, which 95% of Scottish MPs voted against. You know? 97%, sorry. 97% of Scottish MPs voted against. We could use it as a tool of agitation to make sure that Scotland's voice is louder at Westminster while we don't have independence. And the second thing is, R.I.S.E believes that the only real way to end Tory rule in Scotland forever is to become independent. And we're not nationalists, we're not flag wavers. We believe that independence is the best possible route to socialism in Scotland and to a republic, and it would be a chance for us to have a new blueprint of what our country looks like. So if any R.I.S.E MSP is elected, the first thing we'll do is we'll table a motion in the Scottish Parliament to say that the power to call a referendum should lie within the Scottish Parliament and not Westminster. And that's an important thing for us. Another really important thing for us, which sounds quite boring but is very important, is tax. So we believe that tax powers that we have right now should be used to have redistributive measures and make Scotland more equal. So we'd have a top rate income tax of 60%, that's for people earning over £150,000 a year. We believe that they should be paying much, much more into the public purse. And with the revenue that we get from that, there's two things that we'll do. The first thing we'll do is we'll set up a specialist task force in Scotland under the Scotland Revenue Service, and they will be elite tax evader hunters, essentially. And we will make sure that we have a crack team of investigators that will go after corporate interests and big businesses and elites who dodge tax in Scotland, so that we're making sure that it's fair and the rich are paying their fair share. The second thing we will do with that revenue is set up an economic justice fund, and that will be an immediate unconditional source of income for people that have been sanctioned by the DWP. So that's the two things that we do with that. The other thing that we do is that we completely reform local taxation. Our public services are under threat from Tory austerity, but they're also under threat from the SNP government, who have passed down these cuts for councils to implement. We believe that councils should set a no-cuts budget and say, we can't cut anything, these are frontline services, they're very important. But in order to protect our public services, we need to get rid of the council tax, because one, it's unfair, it punishes the poorest in our society, and it makes sure the rich don't pay anything in comparison to what people on lower incomes are paying, and it's not a good source of funding. There's a massive deficit with the council tax. So what we would do is institute this thing called the Scottish Service Tax, and it's based on your ability to pay. So it means, again, that the rich would be paying far, far more in tax than the ordinary working class Scot. So your first £10,000 would go tax free, and your second £10,000 to £20,000 would be taxed at 4.5%, and then on and on. I can give you literature about it. And this would plug a massive gap in funding, and it would protect our public services, but it means that 77% of ordinary Scots would actually be paying less council tax. And again, that goes back to R.I.S.E's I think what differentiates R.I.S.E during this election is that we're not afraid to say the rich need to pay more. They need to pay more, because for too long the burden has been placed upon working class people, you know, and the people that can afford to pay should pay. So those are our two big priorities, I think. Be braver, be bolder, take that mandate that the Scottish people gave you. They gave you it for radical change. They gave you it so that you would change the council tax, so that you would tax the rich more, so that you would ban fracking. People believed in you, and I think right now you're shirking your responsibility. Be brave, be bold, make change. Don't pander to those ideas of like Labour and the Tories. Your ideas about capital flight are the same arguments that people use to scare us out of voting yes. Don't become them. Don't become Better Together. Be the SNP that you promised the people you would be, because if you won't, people will do what they did with Scottish Labour. They will lose faith and they will stop voting for you. So be brave, be bold, be progressive. That's what I'd say to Nicola Sturgeon.